How's it going, everybody? This is the Nitty Gritty. My name is Chad, and with me, as always, is Leonard. We are ready to bring you another edition of our Spotlight series, so creatively named. We're very proud of it, the Spotlight series.
Hey, sometimes basic is best.
Hey, that's right. And this week, we are sure to get the hits because we are going to talk about Mantaur. That is our focus this week, and we are going to get right to it. Now, if you've looked at any of our previous editions of the Spotlight series, we have certain categories we go by. So we're going to start out with his early years. And in his early years, he was born May 14th, 1968, as Mike Halac. He grew up playing hockey, and he actually lived in the same neighborhood, which is Omaha, Nebraska area, but he lived in the same neighborhood as Maurice Mad Dog Vachon. And he actually delivered Mad Dog's newspapers, oddly enough, and that's how he went to his first wrestling show, was as a guest of Mad Dog Vachon, which is interesting. But he didn't grow up a really huge fan of the business, but eventually he would go on to be in the business. And in 1991, he, under the ring name Bruiser Mastino, he traveled to Germany and worked for the Catch Wrestling Association. He debuted on November 11th there, and he lost against a wrestler named Rambo, which definitely I'm going to find a picture of if I can. And he lost to in a World Heavyweight Championship match. And so he remained with that promotion until 1994. And those were his early years. Leonard, have you ever heard of Rambo? Not the movie star, or the movie character, I should say, but the wrestler.
No, I do know that, of course, there are a lot of copycat wrestlers based on a famous movie character.
Get right out of town.
Yeah, a lot of times you'll see that in horror. Horror, you'll see a Freddy knockoff, a Jason knockoff. So I wouldn't be surprised if there was like a Rambo knockoff in somewhere in the mid to late 80s with the headband and all that. I wonder if he spells it Rambo, or for copyrights it's like Rambow.
That would be amazing.
Or Ramboe or something like that. So no, I've never heard of Rambo.
We're already talking too much about this guy.
Yeah, Mantaur is so interesting. We're talking about this random guy neither of us have ever seen.
Yeah. All right. So on that note, we will move on to his spotlight years. And he first wrestled for the WWF in 2 dark matches as Bruiser Mastino. He defeated Nikolai Volkov, and that was on August 26th. And a few months later, January 7th, 1995, episode of Superstars of Wrestling. Actually, it was taped in late 94, but he debuted as Mantaur, and he defeated probably one of the best jobber names I've ever seen, Walter Slow, which is like, it's amazing. That's, so yes, he was the Mantaur character, which is based on the Minotaur from Greek mythology, which is half bull, half man. And oddly enough, they introduced him. I don't know who that announcer was. I'll figure that out. But he introduced him. You can hear it as the Minotaur. And you hear Vince and who was it? DiBiase, I think, was doing it with him on that one. He was like, what did he say? Mantaur? Oh, yeah, he's Mantaur.
Yeah. Well, I know that, and this came up in Bruce Pritchard's podcast when I was listening to it, that apparently a couple references, maybe it was the Wrestling Observer, said he was originally called the Minotaur and became Mantaur, and Bruce was like, no, he was always Mantaur. There was no Minotaur.
Right.
So that, I think that was just a flub by the announcer or the ring announcer, because like Minotaur was, a name from Greek mythology.
Right.
Was a thing that existed. So that was probably just a slip up. I think he was probably always Mantaur.
Right. And so the Minotaur, in Greek mythology, was somebody who charged and trampled people, I guess, or enemies. The Mantaur, he moos at people, or as they say, bellows at people. We'll get more into the gimmick and our opinion of it here.
Yes.
But he came to the ring in the bull or yak or buffalo headdress. And soon after that, he acquired Jim Cornette as a manager, and they ditched the headdress part of it. He had, Leonard, you'll agree, a world-renowned winning streak by defeating jobbers. And his first and only pay-per-view appearance was at the Royal Rumble, and he was eliminated by Lex Luger. He almost qualified for the King of the Ring, but he lost that match. We'll get more into that later. And his final appearance, we'll get to his final match later as well, but his final appearance in the WWF was at In Your House 2 as a lumberjack in the Psycho Sid versus Diesel match. So he didn't have a long career. I think he had a slightly longer career than Big Bully Busick. It was, like pretty much from, it was like January until like the summertime. But,
Yeah.
and this is the part of the show where I would normally say, hey, Leonard, when was the first time you heard of Mantaur? But I think Leonard and I would agree that we followed him even before he was in WWF. We're such huge fans. We remember the vignettes, and we were there from the very first match, right, Leonard? Or am I getting that wrong?
Yeah.
Maybe I'm wrong.
I was actually on the paper route with Mad Dog.
Yeah.
So I knew him since he was a kid. Yeah, in our previous spotlights, I talked about how, I remembered these guys that we were talking about because of the gimmick or something cool that they did, like Ranger Ross rappelling from the ceiling. Mantaur came along in 1995, and I wasn't really watching the product much at that point. That was the new generation era, low point.
Right.
I was in high school. Friends weren't watching anymore, so I really wasn't watching it. So I became familiar with Mantaur probably in the early aughts via the internet, and probably first time was because of the WrestleCrap website.
Right.
Mantaur is usually the go-to joke guy. Because of the gimmick. Not, I wouldn't say so much because of the guy, but because of the gimmick. And when I was looking up stuff I found on YouTube, Cultaholic did a video for last April Fool's Day, April Fool's Day 2019, where they called Mantaur the greatest wrestler who ever lived of all time, and did this very sarcastic
it was like a mix of fact and fiction.
Yeah, it was like calling him that he was the actual Minotaur, and that his career goes back, 1,500 years, and all this. So it was actually, even though we've been doing some sarcasm and all, it was a little rough. There's a point where I was like, get over yourselves, guys.
I agree. I agree. It was like, okay, we get it.
Yeah, and even WWE has taken shots at Mantaur. The Are You Serious series done back around 2012 that Josh Matthews and Road Dogg did.
Yeah,
Mantaur was part of that. So when Mantaur comes up, it's usually as a joke. And even though he didn't have the bull's head long, that's usually what people remember about him.
Right.
And Jim Cornette and Bruce Pritchard, both on their podcasts, said that was an idea that didn't get thought through because he couldn't get into the ring with it on.
Right.
I mean, I know in that debut match against Walter Slow that you see him get on the apron and they cut back to him being in the ring.
Right.
And then he goes to take it off and they cut again. So you don't actually see him remove it either.
Right.
So, and then I think if I remember right, in that first match, he doesn't have the face paint. And then afterwards, when they got rid of the bull's head, they did like
the painted on horns. Yep.
Yeah, painted on horns. And two, while we're here, I'll mention I watched a shoot video with Jim Cornette, who managed Mantaur for a while, when he was asked about it. And even Jim said he thought it was a rib on him. He showed up to a television taping. And the backstage crew guys, even production people, were like, "Oh, that's your new guy," and he's like, "Yeah, whatever, that's my new guy." He thought it was a joke. And then when came time for Mantaur's match, and he was walking out, they were like, "Jim, go, you got to go," and he's like, "Oh." And I couldn't find pictures of this, but I found another piece of a Jim Cornette podcast where he was talking about a photo shoot they did for WWF magazine when they were in Wheeling, that it was at a hotel in Wheeling, where the idea was that Triple H, who was very much doing the blue blood character at that time.
Yeah, it was still just Hunter Hearst Helmsley at that time, right?
At that time, was going to teach Mantaur by Jim asking him like how to dine like a fine, sophisticated gentleman.
Some manners,
And
right?
yes, and it would wind up with Jim taking a pie to the face. So Jim talked about that and how that was sprung on him, and how he was upset because it was sprung on him, and he was already in his clothes for TV. So of course he couldn't be taking a pie to the face when he was already ready for TV. But and one thing I should say is that Jim didn't seem to like the character, and Jim thought that Mike was green, and I think that would be an honest assumption.
Right.
But he really didn't dog the guy, And Jim Cornette will tell you what he thinks of somebody. If he hates you, he hates you.
Yeah, he's not cruel in his
Yeah.
opinions.
No.
It's more of a dismissive, like, yeah, it didn't work.
Yeah, it didn't work. It was a couple months out of my life. I could see them giving Jim to him just one. This guy probably wasn't much of a talker. I don't think when I was looking up stuff, I found really any promos with him.
Right.
So
all he did was moo at people.
Yeah, he would moo. That was his taunt. And we'll probably get into that when we talk matches. But the taunt was the moo, and his theme music was cows mooing and cowbells, and it sounded like field noises. Like
it was
like
Jim, one of Jim Johnston's finest hours there. It's
yes.
yeah, no, it's this is not a good gimmick, obviously, and it's mentioned as a joke for a reason. In Bruce Pritchard's podcast, the main thing he talked about, at least in the one clip that I listened to, was that the huge, thick feet that Mike Halac apparently had. He was like, he's got hooves, I tell you, which is funny.
Yeah, he was so deep on that. Yes,
and you listen. When I was watching, and it seems like every jobber match this guy had, he had a different team of commentators, which was interesting to me. And like one of them was Gorilla Monsoon, and he was like, "What is that?" He's like, "It looks like roadkill." Yes, like it's when you're making jokes in real time about the gimmick, you know it's not going to go over well. And the headset was ridiculous. The fact that he couldn't get in the ring. And I have to say, this guy, he worked like an old school big guy. And this is where the whole thing about Vince's fetish with size in wrestling kind of gets to be annoying, because this was just another big guy. He could do the work in the ring, but I will concur with what Jim Cornette said in one of the clips that we researched, was that the timing wasn't there. And I agree that I don't think the timing was there. Like, he didn't have real crisp work in the ring. And it doesn't, and the fact that he didn't do a promo, like, what was it about the guy that they thought we can make money off of, other than the fact that he was 400 pounds? Yeah. That's the thing. So and you know what? I have to add this. This is nothing against Mike Halac personally. And he honestly, he seems like a super nice guy in all the clips and interviews I've heard him in.
Yeah.
But the gimmick that he was given was not good, and there was only so much that he could do with it. But
go ahead.
I
was going to say the different spotlights like we've done so far. Let's go back and look. Like Big Bully Busey, we understand that it was like an old timey bully character. We thought of ways that could have worked. Ranger Ross is your basic military character. P and News, time when rap was coming up, fine. But a Minotaur type character, a guy with a bull's head, or a guy with painted on horns, what is that? How is that?
That's a Vince thing for sure. Like, or like Conrad in the podcast of Bruce Pritchard, joked like, how much weed were you guys doing when you thought of this? Like, you could just see like Vince sitting there like, I see you as a Mantaur.
That's a good Vince, by the way. That just seems like a gimmick that you do as a joke.
Right.
That just seems like either you think of something that you think is funny, or for whatever reason you want to punish a guy, or you don't like a guy. I understand taking a risk. Hey, not sure how this might work. If you go back and you look, The Undertaker, undead mortician.
Right.
That's a risk of a character, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's something straight out of like he's curtain jerking in Memphis, that type of a gimmick, So that's a risk. But I think there's a difference between taking a risk and just something that even on paper you should know isn't going to work.
Yeah,
Or
I
even
mean,
the first time when they put the bull's head on him and Vince looks at the guy, he should have went, nah, let's think of something else. But,
yeah, and I would be, it would be interesting to talk to Vince today and just ask him, like, did you really think that this could work in some realm of reality? And he would probably answer yes. But
yeah.
this was a cartoonish gimmick, also, we should add, at a time when the audience was changing. The
Mm-hmm.
audience was changing, and WCW would be the first to change according to the audience. And like Leonard, I wasn't watching at this time at all. I was getting older and not interested in wrestling. As you said, all the people around me weren't interested in wrestling anymore. I didn't really care that much about Shawn Michaels or Diesel. So, I wasn't watching, and WWF was clearly behind the times with gimmicks like this. But we have more of his career to go. We are going to get into the post-spotlight years because, like PN News, this guy jumped around a lot. In December of 1995, he debuted in ECW. He had 2 wins and 2 losses there, and apparently he was jeered by the fans at ECW, which is not a surprise because they would chant Mantaur at him, which I really wish there were clips of that. But
yeah, a question, because I didn't get that far. Was he wrestling as Mantaur, or was he wrestling as Bruiser Mastino again?
he was wrestling as Bruiser Mastino.
Okay.
Yep. I forgot to add that. And in a shoot interview that he did with In Your Head Wrestling, he said that he enjoyed his experience there, but his opinion was that Paul's goal was to get whoever was released from WWF and job them out quickly. So, he then briefly returned to the Catch Wrestling Association as probably a better name, Terminator Mastino.
Yeah, that is a good name. Much like Cannonball Grizzly.
Yeah, well, we'll get there. Cannonball makes a return.
Oh, okay.
And in April of 96, Halac returned to the WWF to play the role of Goldust's unnamed bodyguard at In Your House 7. And I went back and watched this, and he was there as like kind of almost a gangster character, but he doesn't have a name, and it was only for this, and it was Goldust's match against the Ultimate Warrior at this event. And after Goldust loses this match, the bodyguard the bodyguard tries to attack the Warrior, but is overpowered by the Warrior, obviously, and body slammed, and that's it. There really wasn't a match because it was just a bunch of theatrics with the Warrior taking Goldust's chair and taking Marlena's cigar and like so on and so forth. But in his shoot interview, Halac mentioned that this was in Nebraska, where he's from. It's in front of his family and friends, so maybe they just did him a favor and said, yeah, come on, we can find something for you to do. He also then worked in the United States Wrestling Association as Tank. He was a member of the Truth Commission, which many people will remember. He wore a mask. It was just a black mask. And he won the Unified World Heavyweight Championship, his first and only wrestling title, on March 17th, 1997. He defeated then champion Jerry Lawler, and he lost it back to Lawler a few days later. He returned to the WWF briefly in June of 97 with the Truth Commission. He did fight as Tank on a couple Shotgun Saturday Night episodes, which I don't know about anybody else, but that was always on at a really weird time in my area. So
yeah,
I never watched it, but
it was only like 1 in the morning or something. Yeah.
Right, yeah. And very often the TV guides would not even list it, so I didn't even know it was on then. But if you listen to his interviews, he talks about it. He never didn't really go to the WWF, but he was there in 2 Shotgun Saturday Night episodes, and he was released later that summer. In September of 97, he had a dark match in WCW against Damien 666, which is a great name. But that was his only stint in WCW. He returned to the CWA in September of 98, again as Bruiser Mastino. He competed in the European wrestling promotion. He would compete in Germany for the Riotkus Wrestling Alliance, and apparently he won a battle royal on the night he worked for this Germany promotion, and he ended up fighting his cousin Cannonball Grizzly for the RWA International title. and Grizzly won that one. But I also found a clip of them doing a body slam competition against each other, which is amazing. And I will post that on our Instagram page.
Yes, please do. I actually missed that one, so I would love to see that. And just in case, to clarify, Cannonball Grizzly is PN News. And
That's
of
right.
course, we got the Mantaur because we did the PN News episode, and they are cousins.
That's right. And with PN News, he promoted an independent tour entitled Beach Brawl 09. They did a couple shows in Omaha, Nebraska, and Hardington, Nebraska. In May of 2015, he was known as the Turkish Terror Mad Mustafa, which is also a great name. Mm-hmm. And he won a title there, and he ended up being an inaugural inductee into the Omaha Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame. And then recently, and I have to mention this just because of the name, he wrestled as Mantaur at GCW's Joey Janela's Spring Break Part 2 in what was called a clusterfuck battle royal, which is amazing. I don't know why that's not referred to with, because that's what battle royals are. Let's face it, which I think is just a funny in joke. But hey, and that was in New Jersey, which is where I'm from. So that is his post spotlight years. Leonard, do you have any thoughts on any of his post spotlight years? There's a lot of information there. But...
Yeah, a ton. When I was researching, watching stuff, I did find a match of him as Tank from USWA against Steve Dunn of Well Done.
Everybody remembers Steve Dunn. You don't need to go into his...
Right. You know, we haven't done any tag teams for the spotlights. Maybe we could do Well Done as a tag team.
There you go.
So I did see that. Other than that, I was kind of surprised by how much he was around and he floated around and how he popped up here and there. I did find reference to the Joey Janela clusterfuck battle royal that he was part of, which I believe Janela won. So again, much like with PN News, I think it's awesome that he is still around, that he's still wrestling, that he has had such a great international career. You know, I've mentioned before how I do fantasy wrestling drafts and different things and cards. I think at some point I will need to do Mantaur versus PN News. I think I have to draft those guys and make that a match somewhere.
Absolutely.
So again, I think it should be said, much like PN News, that, you know, the gimmick of Mantaur, not a great gimmick, you know, hard to do anything with. But, you know, when we're kind of poking at it, we're poking at the gimmick. We're not poking at Mike the Man or Mike the Wrestler, who, as you can see, has had a very long career. And I think it's great that he's had and that he's wrestled so many different people all over the world.
Right. And so now we will get into his notable matches, and there aren't a ton of them. But we will start off by talking about his finisher, and he didn't have one, at least that I saw. I mean, well, okay, so let's get into this. So he had a couple, in the matches that I saw, he used different finishers at different times. He had like a pretty basic splash, which was described as a splash that he really didn't even get off his feet for.
Mm-hmm. He just kind of fell.
Right. There was a time he did a spine buster and won. There was a time that he did like a basic slam and he won, a power slam, I should say. In one match, they described something he was doing as a stampede, like a charging move. He also won with a belly to belly. So, you know, if they obviously didn't have a lot invested in him, if he didn't even have like a proper finisher. But some of his notable matches, I had mentioned earlier that he failed to qualify for the King of the Ring. That was because he lost to Bob Sparkplug Holly. I'll just say about this match, it was really weird to see Bob Holly come out all smiles and mugging to the crowd. It just,
with the long hair and the STP,
it just didn't look natural. I mean, because he's known as a tough guy / bully in many circles. So the fact that he's coming out here and trying to play this super baby face was weird. He fought Razor Ramon and lost in a count out. And it's funny, in all my research, they described it as a disqualification because Jeff Jarrett got involved, but it wasn't a disqualification. It was a count out. And
yeah, I watched that one. What happens is that Razor Ramon is like jawing at the roadie at ringside.
Right.
And so Mantaur tries to capitalize by charging from behind. And if memory serves, Razor drops pulling the rope down. He goes over to the floor. Then Jarrett comes out. So he gets counted out while Ramon's like jawing at Roddy and Jarrett. So it was more about the Roddy, Jarrett, Ramon storyline and Mantaur was just like collateral damage, so they could do that bit.
Right, and Mantaur probably wouldn't do good in last man standing matches if one simple flip over the top rope gets you down for a count of 10.
Right.
You know, so yeah, and in that match with Razor Ramon, it should be mentioned that during his shoot interview, he had mentioned that Razor slapped him pretty hard, and I went back to watch it after I heard him talk about it, and they apparently had a argumentative conversation in the ring, according to him, and then they got into an altercation in the back because of that. And this apparently was the death knell for him, because the Click was very much a thing at this time in WWF, and he didn't score any points by getting on Razor Ramon's bad side, which is a shame, but that's his version of the story anyway. But you can see in the match that Razor slaps him pretty good.
And watching that match too, I didn't think it was anything special. You know, Scott Hall is a guy that can get a good workout about anybody. I think we talked about that before in one of our shows when he was wrestling someone. And but here it seems like Mantaur's doing his stuff, Scott's doing his stuff,
right?
And it could just because they're not getting along, so they're not working together to do a cohesive match. So I was actually watching that when that came on, like, oh, well, this should be good, Scott Hall, and it wasn't. And so now that you've given me the backstory, which I didn't know, now I can go, oh, that's probably why it wasn't. They just didn't get along.
Right. And Mr. Halac said that he was pretty good friends with Bret Hart. He did have a match against Bret Hart on Wrestling Challenge. That is not on the WWE Network yet. So I was not able to find that one, but I'm interested to see that because Bret Hart can work with pretty much anybody. So I'd be curious to see how that one turned out. He did have, like I said, he did have some matches in ECW against the Dark Ninja. He won that one against Hack Myers. He lost against 911. He lost. There's a clip of 911 choke slamming him, which is interesting. And against El Puerto Ricano, who I don't know, but he won that one. And what's funny is that there was a match that he did after all this for the Pro Wrestling Syndicate in Metuchen, New Jersey. Now, Metuchen is town right next to where I am, and they called it a dream match, Mantaur versus El Matador, Tito Santana.
That's good booking. That's good booking.
Yeah, they were both older and out of shape, and it was an event which is wonderfully named Fightmare Before Christmas. And but yeah, so that was a match that happened. It wasn't very pretty to look at, but it exists, and he lost that to the Flying Forearm. So those are his notable matches. Leonard, before we get to some random notes and we wrap up here, are there any matches that I failed to mention that you wanted to talk about? Actually, as I'm saying that out loud, one of the jobber matches I watched had Stan Lane doing play-by-play, which I thought was really interesting. Because I did not know that he ever did that, but he did it in one of them.
Yeah, he worked for WWF for a very brief period,
right?
And I know I've heard him on commentary before. Nothing special, but I like Stan. Anyway, one of the jobber matches I watched was against a guy named Ben Jordan from February 2nd of '95. And that was very much the same cookie cutter to the Walter Slow match. One that you didn't mention, I'm surprised, is Mantaur versus Bam Bam Bigelow. I actually found two matches of theirs.
That was his last match. I forgot to add that because I was going to go back to it. You're right. That was his last match in WWF was against Bam Bam. You're right.
Yeah, I found two different ones. One had French commentary on it. I actually thought those were pretty good big man matches, big man versus big man matches. Of course, Bam Bam's about the same size as Mantaur, but Bam Bam, of course, was a lot more seasoned and could really move, super agile for his size, one of the best big men ever. But I thought they were able to bounce off each other really well. And because they are so big, everything they did, looked good on each other. Because when you're a guy that big slamming another guy that big, it just, it looks cool, it looks good. So of all the matches I watched with him, I thought the ones I watched against Bam Bam Bigelow were the best.
No, I would agree.
And I couldn't find these, but I did find a shoot interview with Duke the Dumpster Droese.
Yeah, I figured you were going to go here.
Where he said he worked against him all the time. This is probably on house shows because I didn't find any of that. But one of the stories he told was the fact that he had, as a joke, had slipped him, I think it was 2 Xanaxes or something before they were going to get on a plane,
Yeah.
and he had wound up taking 2 others, so he had 4 Xanaxes and wasn't. He's like, "Yeah, I'm not scared. It doesn't bother me," and he wasn't. He was fine. So I'm pretty sure I've never had Xanax. I've never been on it. So
Yeah. I
the
have no
fact
point of
that
comparison there, but
yeah, but the fact that Duke was super impressed by the fact that he could take 4 and was fine should probably say something. And again, Duke the Dumpster was one of those guys much from that era of WWF. Bob Holly was moonlighting as a NASCAR driver. He was moonlighting as a garbage man. And I thought it was interesting that Duke said he really liked working with Mantaur, and he thought they had good
yeah.
matches. So I would love to see a match between the two of them. But yeah, as far as significant matches go overall, not a whole lot, at least from that Spotlight era that we're talking. And as we said, most of the jobber matches were very cookie cutter. Again, he would use a different
Yeah.
finisher, but it was a lot of whips to the corner and just whipping the guy around the ring and just kind of throwing his weight around on
A lot of
on
mooing.
numbers. Yeah, a lot of moving. Hit a move, moo. Hit a move, moo. He moves as much as Ric Flair woos.
That's very true.
Yeah.
So we'll wrap up here. We'll get into some random notes. We mentioned some of our random things as we were talking there, but when I listened to his interviews, he's a very positive person. He didn't have anything really bad to say about any of the promotions he was at. He had a great experience being in all of the companies he worked with. It was really great to hear that. He would be in he has a short IMDb resume. He was in a horror movie called Toxic Tutu, which is apparent. I don't know if that's half documentary, half fiction, but he's in it. Jake Roberts is apparently in it as well. But so we'll have to look that one up. And he was in a couple shorts as well. And one random note that we haven't talked about that confused me greatly when I was trying to look up Bruiser Mastino matches. And when I did that, I came across a match in WCW against Sting, and the guy's name is Bruiser Mastino, but it's not Mike Halac. It's Kane.
Yes.
And I was super confused. I was like, wait, that doesn't look like this guy at all. People are describing it as Kane. What am I missing here? Apparently they both had the same name at one point, which I don't know. How does that even happen, or why? Even as a rib, why? But
yeah, even if the specific name is Bruiser Mastino. I mean, there's been dudes under a hood called the Executioner and
right,
stuff like that.
You would understand that, right?
Yeah, but how do you come up with Bruiser Mastino other than the fact that maybe they needed a name for Kane because he didn't have a name at the last second? Someone was like, it just came, one of those subconscious things. Oh, Bruiser Mastino, and didn't realize
he doesn't even look like a Mastino. Why not just call him Bruiser Jacobs? I don't, hey, that's
something like that.
But yeah,
the only other thing.
Go ahead.
I was saying the only other thing I had to mention was that I actually also found a news video. I wasn't sure exactly where it was from, but it was talking. Mike Halac is a real person, but mentioned his career as a wrestler. About diabetes, how he's a diabetic,
right,
and that he was in denial, and his health was taking a huge downturn until a nurse, took interest in him and engaged him and reached out to him and said, "Hey, I'm going to help you with this." And because of her, he changed his diet. He started taking his medication. He got his A1C down,
right.
And then from there, it kind of turns into a diabetic treatment video like this.
Right. Yeah, I saw that video as well.
Yeah. So, but I thought it was really interesting, and I thought it was actually, I would say, brave of him to fully admit, yeah, I was in denial. I wasn't doing what I should be doing. And it really took someone to kind of slap me in the face, metaphorically, and give me a wake-up call.
Right. Yeah, it is. Diabetes can be very life-threatening. So it's good to see that, it does make you look at him in a different way. But yeah, unfortunately for him, I'm glad, like you were saying, Leonard, I'm glad that he's still in the business and, made a career out of it. But it wasn't a very good gimmick. And unfortunately, it's kind of a legacy that he's left with, which is of this gimmick that failed miserably.
Yeah.
And is funny and doesn't date well. But That is my thoughts on Mantaur. Leonard, do you have
Now, it
anything
should
to
be
wrap
said
up?
that he is way more remembered than, say, Walter Slow or Ben Jordan.
Oh, come on now, the iconic Walter Slow.
Oh, that should have been his nickname, the iconic Walter Slow. So there is something to the fact to say that he is remembered. Maybe he's remembered as a joke, but when people go to name a funny wrestler or name a gimmick that didn't work, he's always at the top of those lists. So he's remembered in that way.
Right.
Maybe being remembered infamously isn't the way you want to be remembered. But for him, we're still talking about him today. Other
Right.
people still talking about him today.
And
Called a
he
holic.
still looks at it in a positive way. So.
Yeah, and the fact that what he went from it and got out of it, and I was gonna say the fact that Cultaholic did this, what was it, like a 5 to 6 minute super smarmy video
Right.
on Mantaur, speaks to just how well people remember him. Because if he was forgotten, it would be like, who, what? But the fact that he is so renowned because of a bad gimmick has given him kind of a second life. I mean, I'm sure that's the reason why he wound up in the Joey Janela Battle Royal and all that.
I'm sorry, what was it called? What was that? What was that battle?
The Joey Janela. Oh, the clusterfuck. I forgot. The clusterfuck battle royal.
That's what I was setting you up there.
You were, because I was like, no, I said it.
You were like, I said it clearly.
Yes, you know what I meant. Oh, so yeah, he's getting work. He's known for that. So sometimes even being remembered as a joke, especially if you lean into it and you're in on the joke, nothing wrong with that.
Absolutely. And for those wondering, he doesn't have the headset anymore. He said it's probably buried in the WWF warehouse somewhere. But that will wrap up our Mantaur episode. We'll be back with you next week. And I should also add, please check out my other show, Dailies to Downloads. Leonard, among others, was a guest with Eric and I on that, where we talk about our favorite and least favorite horror movie heroes. So please check that out. We will see you next week. We're not sure with what yet, but we will be back with you. So for Leonard, my name is Chad. We will see you then.